I'm now going to recognize myself for my questioning. I didn't want to have to spend any time relitigating the question of whether or not climate change is real. Let me just say the scientific evidence for climate change is unequivocal, and it demonstrates that greenhouse gas emissions have been dramatically warming the Earth's surface, and this is based on now many decades of scientific evidence. Also, California hardly needs me to defend their excellent record in rising to the occasion of dealing with climate change, but I'm submitting an article for the record, headline, California breaks record by achieving 100% renewable energy for the first time. 100% of the energy in their state portfolios now comes from renewable energy sources. Now, so my friend Mr. Sessions had to leave. I want to thank him for noting that we had hearings about pipeline safety, but also about the failure of a number of pipeline companies to honor their contracts and their legal obligations to make restitution to landowners or to restore land that had been damaged that was taken from private landowners by the eminent domain process. So we were looking at abuse of eminent domain to have the government, in service of pipeline companies, declare private land, the government's land, then turning it over to the pipeline companies, and it was supposed to be restored to the status quo ante, and it wasn't. And that's throughout the Southwest and the West and the Midwest where we've seen that. It's a separate problem, but I thank him for gesturing to those hearings. Now, as to today's matter, I'm glad that my friend Mr. Higgins pointed out that there is violence at demonstrations. There has been violence at some of those demonstrations at the pipeline, and that's not what I'm here to talk about. Anyway, I don't defend violence in any way at all, just as I'm sure Mr. Higgins would not defend the violence that overran the Capitol of the United States on January 6, 2021, while we defend the right of people to gather in the seat of government in the nation's capital, to peaceably assemble under the First Amendment and to nonviolently protest and petition for redress of grievances. We do not support the right of people to come and beat our police officers over the head with Confederate battle flags or Trump flags or American flags, and I'm sure he would not defend that. But I just don't want to confuse the issue, because what we're talking about here is First Amendment protected nonviolent expression. And obviously, every state has laws, and there are federal laws against violence, which should be enforced against anyone of any ideological stripe who thinks that the Constitution or his or her own political mission gives them the right to commit violence against other people. Now, since we're talking about defending First Amendment rights, I want to start first with you, Ms. Ramasastry, because we're talking about some different things. SLAPP suits are one, and if you could answer as cogently as possible, what are the most effective forms of anti-SLAPP statutes adopted by the states, and what are the least effective, and so what should we be looking at in Congress?
I think the key issue here is really about a review that allows for courts to dismiss cases based on this idea: can a company or whoever it is that's bringing this suit make a prima facie case that there really is some underlying substantive harm? This is what's key. And so again, if the case, if the underlying action that's been complained about by the environmental group or whoever is a matter of public concern, and you can define that, and I think in certain ways, relating to public protest or engaging the government, that's one key thing. So scope, and then the issue of how a court can sort of quickly determine. What we really need to do is say, whoever's bringing the SLAPP suit has to be able to demonstrate that the case really factually has merit. I mean, that's the crux of that. That's what's most effective.
In other words, you force them to essentially prove or at least prefigure the case right up front, rather than allowing it to drag on for years.
Yes, that's right. That they have to do that right away,
Gotcha.
and that allows for that balance.
Thank you very much. Ms. Whitehat, let me come to you. Thank you for your very vivid description of the critical infrastructure legislation and what that means. How is critical infrastructure defined in these laws? Do they define, for example, a state capitol or a school board or the U.S. Congress or voting as critical infrastructure?
I understand critical infrastructure includes things like railroad lines, not waterways, not our water systems. I think it's like electrical lines, those kind of things.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And finally, I wanted to come to both Mr. Baxt, if I've got time, and also to Ms. Padmanabha. Both of you, I think, mentioned the abuse of the RICO statute, and perhaps Ms. Page, about abuse of the RICO statute to go after people who are just engaged in civic organizing. I know a lot of small businesses, even some big businesses, have also complained about the way that RICO is being used as a way to go after them. Do you all think, as briefly as possible, that RICO reform is also indicated as a way to protect free expression? And perhaps we can start with you, Ms. Padmanabha.
Thank you, Chairman Raskin, for your question. Absolutely, I think that there needs to be some sort of overhaul of how RICO can be used. I will say that in the case of Greenpeace, while we thought a lot of groups came together because they felt that RICO was going to be used as the new tool against organizing, and we fought these suits head on, we were able to get RICO thrown out of both of our federal cases, and we haven't seen any new federal RICO cases filed because we actually have good law. That doesn't say that this tactic won't reappear, but I think that both in the courts and in the legislature, RICO does need to be addressed.
Okay, Mr. Bax, what did you think about it?
Yeah, real briefly. I don't want to claim to be a RICO expert, but to the extent that the Department of Justice is using RICO to try to censor speech, protected speech, then yes, there need to be reforms for speech, not necessarily actions.
Thank you. And Ms. Page?
I'm not well placed to discuss federal RICO. We've been focused on the state law use of state RICO charges and conspiracy charges against protest-related activity.